All right, welcome back to the next SMMA lesson. Again, now we're going to go back with Jennifer Baca, the CEO of Knowledge Society and TaiLopez.com, and now you're going to learn how to hire.
So the next question I am commonly asked is, okay, great, I've made some decisions up front, I have my policies set up, I know my EIN, what do I do from here? The very next thing that you need to do is create a job description. Now that may sound overly formal, but I will tell you it's saved me a lot of confusion and a lot of frustration when dealing with employees in the future. If you set it up the right way, it'll save you time. So what's a job description? A job description is very simply a 3-step understanding of what the job entails and what you're looking for. So the job description is in 3 sections. The first, the duties and responsibilities that you're expecting that new employee to handle. It can be everything from making coffee and running your website to, I really just need you to do the finances, I need somebody to understand the P&L, handle all banking. It's as detailed as you need it to be, and it can be all-encompassing, because as your first person that you're going to be hiring, you're going to want them to handle a lot because you're handling a lot. So start broad and then narrow into the very specifics of the job is how I start. The second part of a job description is what skills are you needing from them to bring to the table. So if, for example, you're hiring an editor, you might want them to have Adobe Premiere as a technical skill. If they're handling your accounting, you might want them to have QuickBooks Online. So be specific about what skills you think they need. If you don't know, that's okay. Just say, experience in accounting, handling bookkeeping, handling bank accounts. Be as specific as you can. If you don't know all the terminology because it's not your go-to field, that's okay. Just be specific to the best of your ability. The third of the job description specifications or sections is the experience needed to do the job. So some people say, well, it's my first person, I don't need them to have a lot of experience because I'm learning this myself. But I will say that if you're hiring somebody to handle your finances and your accounting, you probably don't want to have a high school person coming out of high school handling that for you. So keep that in mind. Now, there is a hack to this. There's a really good, easy way to cheat. Go online. Look at various job postings for the things that you are looking for in a position. So if you're looking to hire a finance person, Google finance jobs or finance job descriptions, and that way you can identify, does that sound like me? Maybe I can tweak that. Use it as a template. It makes it easier on you. It can save you time and a lot of energy. There is a bonus section that a lot of people like to include, which is a little bit about you and why a candidate would be interested in applying for your job. So about you, what makes you and your energy, your company special? What are you driving towards? Why should they get on board with you? And why are you looking to hire? It's a fast-growing, exciting company, et cetera, et cetera. What are you looking from them? So I'm looking for a high-paced, energetic team member that's willing to roll up their sleeves and do whatever they can to help my business grow. Those kind of touches will make your job description stand out when you start to post. Okay? That leads us into the very next question of, where do I post my job? There's a couple of different avenues you can take, and it really depends on what level of candidate you're looking to hire. So, for example, if you're hiring a person that just can run around, get you mail, get you coffee, and do some deposits for you, maybe do a couple of posts online for you, that's very different than hiring an accountant and the approach to how you post for that position. So let's start in 2 directions. For low-level positions, I like to post on Craigslist, and the U.S. definitely has a strong career center on Craigslist, but also a lot of international locations have the ability to post on Craigslist as well. I like to go to local colleges and recruit someone out of a local college that maybe they're looking to pick up some extra work as they're putting themselves through college. I hire in the discipline that they're working in. So I look for specific candidates that are coming out of finance, for example, or going towards their finance degree, and I will hire them if it's a low-level, very low-level finance position. Or somebody that's working on, learning the ins and outs of website design. The other thing that I've done that has been crazily successful is I will actually post jobs at Starbucks and Coffee Bean. I know it sounds crazy, but people that are looking tend to spend a lot of time in one of those locations because they're looking at using those companies' internet provider. So it seems to be very successful. Again, those are low-level positions. Even the finance position I spoke about, that's very, very low level. If you're going to have to handle the bulk of your finances, but you just need somebody to open the mail and kind of do some basic banking deposits for you, you can start there. For higher level positions, the posting that I'm going to talk about now is typically paid posting, and it's a more savvy way to look at attaining higher level employees. So where I always start is by creating a LinkedIn profile of myself if you don't already have one. It's very easy. You put on your past experience, you talk a little bit about your company, and I put postings in my personal status. So if I'm looking for somebody that's high level and I have myself well connected on the LinkedIn page, that post will go out to all the people I know so that they know I'm looking. The second thing I do is I will also, depending on the level, I might also post the actual job description as a job on the LinkedIn page. Again, it's about how deep your pockets are for this particular position. These posts can run $300 to $500, which sounds like a lot, but again, if you're looking for a high-level person to take off a lot of heavy lifting from you, you want to basically put that investment in your recruiting process. The next thing I do is I will also post on Monster. Monster can be $300 to $500 as well, but it has a huge reach. And if you're looking for a high-level candidate, you want as many resumes as you can get so that you're doing your research. You know, we talk a lot in this company about getting your K. That's getting your knowledge around a particular subject. It's the same thing with candidates. The more information you get, the more understanding you have of the caliber of candidates out there that are available. So, Monster. And then the last thing I do is I attend a lot of networking events. So people out there that are really good aren't necessarily looking for a job. But if you're attending networking events, and it could be anything from professional organizations within your specific field to going and looking at different conferences, kind of being available to talk to will actually bubble up to the surface some great candidates that weren't on the job market but might be interested in joining your team. So again, two different approaches: the low-level position, which is where most people will start, and that's what I would suggest, and then the high-level posting. Don't bleed a lot of money into the hiring process until you're ready. Most people start with a low-level position before they move up to that higher position. I myself, having run several businesses, I always start with the finance side because I like to be client-facing, and so I start high, but that's because I'm really used to looking at job positions and candidates. I recommend the opposite for other people, that this is their first interviewing process, first time posting, but you can do a combination of the two. You know, you can get as much K on the subject as you want. You can post high and low, and it will really give you a good breadth of who's available on the job market today. The next step that I like to go over is how do you go through that initial phase of interviewing somebody. Interviewing can be a very weird conversation. They want something from you, you want something from them. You're trying to get as much information from them as possible. But what I tell first-time interviewers is just relax. Before you go into the interview process, give yourself a list of 10 to 15 questions that you know that you want to ask that person, and yet you want to ask every person going forward. What I've found is that consistency is important when you interview. So if you've got 10 candidates that you have coming in and you ask them all the same question, you're going to get a really good sense of who you want to hire based on their answering of those questions. So give yourself a list, make the questions specific to the job that you are having them apply for, take notes during the meeting on a separate piece of paper or on that questionnaire. And notes are important because we often get wrapped up in the interview process, so we start a dialogue and people are talking really fast back and forth. Take notes. Take a step back and take notes. That was my first go-to when I started interviewing, is I would take a lot of notes. I now have learned how to keep a lot of it in my head, but I don't suggest it up front because you're out there getting your K. You should be at least interviewing 10 people for that first position. And it's hard to have that all in your brain, and all of those questions in your brain, and be able to remember who said what and to make the best decision possible. Bring them back more than just have them in more than one time. If you are around the candidate more, you'll be able to see who they are. The more questions you ask, the more time you spend with them, you'll be able to see if they're a good fit for you. I know that I have made some hiring decisions in the past that were not the best because I was in a hurry. That's why when we hire here, for example, they will start with my recruiting coordinator, then they will meet another person from one of the teams that I'm recruiting for. Then if both of those people like them, then I will sit down and interview them. So if you have the ability to have someone with you, have them in the interview with you so that you can have 2 points of view on that candidate. But bring them back a second time if you feel like you're narrowing it down to 1 or 2 people. Ask for references, not just any references. This is where people get a little bit, there's a lot of controversy around it, because people, of course, are only going to give you references of people that like them. But I asked for very specific references. One of the references can, yes, be a coworker. I want at least 2 references from previous bosses. And if they are new into the employment cycle, I asked for 2 references from different teachers. So it gives you a bigger breadth of who's going to say good things about them. And I actually don't really review the in writing references. I actually like to get on the phone with people and talk to them. The last thing that I tell people to do is don't rush. You know, this is an investment in you and your company. And the last thing you want to do is make a bad hire, so take your time. Okay? It's important. Ask the questions, get a feel for the person, take notes, have a list, get your references, but don't rush, because rushing is where you'll find that you have the biggest area for mistakes. Before I hire someone, I also ask them in the interview process, what are they looking to make? That's really important, because if you're looking to pay someone $12 an hour and they're looking for $75 an hour, you know you're in a very different place. So oftentimes I'll ask that question in a pre-interview, so a pre-interview phone call. So before we even bring them in, we want to know that, because I'm not a big fan of wasting anyone's time. And I think that's important. Your time is valuable, their time is valuable. Respect that time and ask that question up front. Before you hire, I also recommend doing 3 very specific things. Do a background check, but don't manage it yourself. There's a lot of laws that are now in the middle of how we process background checks. So for example, in California, as of last week, week before last, we are no longer able to run a background check without giving the candidate an offer of employment. Now, in that offer of employment, so the offer letter that we talked about in the last lesson, I will put in there specifically this position and offer is contingent upon a successful background check. Okay, it's important to know if you have a previous felon that you're hiring as a finance person. You know, you might want to make a different decision, especially if the reason for their felony is stealing from the company, for example. So do your research. Do it through a third party. There's a lot of third party companies out there. I've used Checker. I've used payroll company, background check companies. I've used Criteria Corp. That's part 1. Part 2, call their references. And don't be afraid to spend time and ask some hard questions. They might not respond, or they might say, I can't answer that, but ask the question, and if they don't respond, move on to something else. The third thing is, we do a lot of personality testing here at the company. And the reason why we take that extra step is that not everybody works well with everybody. And the more you know about a candidate, the better off you are. But the second part of that is that it also helps us understand how to work with the various people that we hire. So there's a couple different background check companies personality companies that we use, and they're online tests, and literally we ask people to take the test, do a screenshot, and send it to us via email. We use hexaco.com. We use Criteria Corp as our cognitive testing company. So that's personality, but it's also cognition and IQ. We use 16 personalities, and we also use Dark Triad. So feel free to use any of those. Most of them are free services. Criteria Corp is a paid service, but it does allow you to customize the testing that you're doing. So I do recommend them. I don't have any desire to recommend them. I'm not getting paid by them, but they've shown to be a very good company. So a couple of resources: Criteria Corp, Hexaco.com, 16 Personalities, and Dark Triad. And then the last section that I'll cover with you today is really understanding you've got a great candidate, you know how much they want to make, but how much do you want to pay them? That tends to be a bit of a sticky situation for a first-time hire. You get very personally attached to your money. You want them to succeed, you want them to work really hard, but you don't really know where to start. So let me give you a couple of tips there. The online resources like salary.com, while it's very useful, it's about 10 to 20% higher than the normal hiring range. So I tell people, look at it as a guide to see what other positions that are similar to the one that you're hiring for is listed. But keep in mind, it's going to be higher than what industry standard is. The next place I look at is glassdoor.com to see those salary ranges. A lot of people will do a whole salary survey of the industry. They'll pay people big money to do that. But these two resources can save you a lot of time, energy, and effort. The third thing you have to strongly consider is, what can you pay? So if they're coming in at a very high rate and you can only pay here, then you need to start considering something else, which is incentive pay. So what can you do that can incentivize them to get paid as a discretionary bonus? So for example, if we're going to pay somebody $10 an hour because that's your budget, but let's say they increased your sales by 30%, well, then you're going to have some room to give them more money. And that's going to incentivize them to push harder for you. It's going to probably have an easier discussion for the two of you to have an easier discussion when it comes to pay, because you'll already have it mapped out and as a plan. So incentive pay is important. Keep in mind that based on your local place of authority, so like in California, we have a specific hiring rate that we have to hire at. California is $10 an hour, for example. There's other locations that have different hiring wages, and it's also dependent on the city that you're in. So while we're in California, if I'm in San Francisco, the hiring wage there is $15 an hour. That's their minimum rate. So keep your minimum rate at what your local area requires, and then look at incentive pays around that if you're trying to bridge the gap between what the industry standard is, what you think that they want, and what you're able to afford. Okay? The other thing is that don't let that conversation be scary. There's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of people to talk to, and practice. The more mapped out the hiring plan is, the more mapped out the conversation is, the better off you're going to feel, and the easier the conversation will go. All right, so that's it for me today.